Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! I'm a girl who just felt the need to say that. I have a really close friend who always gets these phones that she never uses. About 7 weeks ago, I was walking home from the friend's place where I got the phone. She sold it to me at a really cheap price. Anyway, I was walking home with my mask on and I was so excited because it was an iPhone 11 and I only ever had an iPhone 9. I was walking in my neighborhood and I live in a nice neighborhood, not like the rich places, but a relatively nice neighborhood. I was like a block away when this lady in a normal carrying cot started jogging next to me. I'm a very nice person, but I do have boundary issues. She's not wearing a mask, so I just move over. I guess that was wrong because the second I did, she scoffs. Now I saw her jogging a while back and I thought she must be going pretty slow if I'm walking, and she's only a couple feet ahead. I stupidly decided to stop and grab the nice new phone and open it. Just as I pulled out the phone, she immediately saw and stopped walking back to me. Then she goes, "You really shouldn't be walking in this neighborhood since you clearly don't belong." Now I was wearing some Converse and sweatpants with a white shirt that I would normally wear to a friend's place. I'm also Mexican and my skin is dark. I just stared at her then proceeded walking to my home. She yelled out, "Witch, this is not your neighborhood. You don't belong here." Then she proceeded to run straight at me, so I ran all the way home. When I got home, I ran up the steps while she was still yelling. I fumbled with the keys and she thought I was breaking in. I get the door open and at that moment, she grabs my hand with a new phone, then has the audacity to scream, "You stole that phone!" I pull harder to loosen my grip she has on my arm, which causes Karen to fall back on her back. I then proceeded to flip her off and run it to my home, locking it all up. I could hear yelling and that she's calling the cops. So I called my friend to get her to come over and get all the paperwork for the phone because I thought that would probably prove my innocence. My friend and I live about 5 minutes driving distance away from each other, so she arrived shortly after the cops came. After almost an hour of talking and Karen yelling, I gave my statement and the cops said I will be okay. The woman went ballistic, at which the neighbors came out. A few just went back in, but the few that stayed saw her get arrested for assaulting an officer. I watched her get driven off. Since then, I have had no problems with her. Maybe a few death glares, but nothing else. I was pretty scared when she started chasing me, but at least she got what she deserved. Any helpful advice in case she tries again or I meet another Karen on how I could have acted, please let me know. I don't want to have to go through that again. This story takes place in a McDonald's drive-thru. I'm in a car with my brother and we were craving some McDonald's. We pull in a drive-thru and here comes Karen. We were in our car in front of the Karen. She was riding a BMW car and a Karen-style haircut. We drove our car up and it was our time to order. We start ordering, getting our regular orders, then all of a sudden, we hear a pump on the back of our car. We looked at the back of the car and of course, you guessed it, Karen bumped our car. We walk out the car and confront the wild Karen. "Karen, you hit our car."
"No, you hit our car. I'm gonna press charges. I'm calling the cops."
"Go ahead, call the cops." Karen gets on the phone and says to the cop,
"This man broke my car and is threatening me."
Facepalm. The cops arrive and the Karen continuously says to the cops I threatened her. The cop walks up to me and asks if this is true and I deny it. The cop walks into the McDonald's and asks the manager to see the camera footage. They tell me and Karen to sit down and wait while they review the footage. 5 minutes go by and they walk out and ask me if I want to press charges. I said yes. After all this, I headed home and my brother and I had a good laugh about the weirdness of Karens. Backstory: 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my two cousins who were both in their early 20s alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids will receive half of their share of inheritance if a parent passes before the children reach age 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually pass. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the two paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money within 6 years. He was back to living in a condo working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer's salary and buying copious amounts of drugs. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely rich woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapped my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she's locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. And guess who would they always ask? You got it. My grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lended a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorites among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot in the mouths of my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 gremlins into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors so it couldn't be locked. This was a start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far to place one of those little mechanical noisemakers in the cabinet in my room. The ones that play sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of my grandpa so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time I was 18 and in a position of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in a nightstand with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I'm out getting my grandfather's food when I come home and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox but never loaded into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it. As a 6-year-old wouldn't be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was to, load my gun and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was nonsense, and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house. But my cousin, who is a cop, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave, and that he hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had one, or so he thought. The next day I apologized to my grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it best I move out until things cool down, but once they do, I will be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I'm still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad, as they had sealed payday with my grandpa. It was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our two cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. The numerical line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me, from my grandparents, as he's the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of my grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and metals was extensive to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it, right? It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy jerk of a cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house as soon as possible, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, that jewelry was never going to go to him anyways. So his actions were purely his own, since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with a lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoe boxes worth of my grandma and grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen wondering why it was all there when my cousin walked in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up, which was true, but there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would screw himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wills had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over my grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes that made him contemplate his sanity over greed. My cousin's witch of a wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years, as he is all but disgraced now. You can call this a fairy tale ending, and in this particular part of the story it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the IRS and FBI later on, but honestly, I would rather have my grandparents. I'm a high school performing arts teacher. I come back after school hours for evening music/theater events quite often, but I also help with evening athletic events from time to time. Most sports teams and their poster organizations engage in racketeering by charging for parking at their events, starting 2.5 to 3 hours before it starts. No one shows up until 10 minutes before any event. I usually know the people who are taking money, so I don't even tap the brakes on the way in and just throw up a peace sign. Sometimes someone I don't know is a monkey taker/traffic director, but my procedure remains the same. Usually it's a puzzled look until I park and get out. I'm well known around these parts, which turns into a smile and wave from them. Every once in a while though, I'll get briefly pursued until I say, "I work here, buddy," and hold up my ID or point to my parking pass. I work as a game official, sideline chain/down marker for Friday night American football, and sometimes run late and have to sprint into the building to make kickoff. So that can look a little sketchy, but once they see my school staff shirt, They leave me alone. Back during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, Malaysia was hit pretty hard, especially the small independent banks. The Prime Minister at the time passed a bill to save the banking economy by having all the larger corporate banks buy out the smaller independent banks. At the same time, he made the One Malaysia Home Loan policy. Under this, the larger banks that bought out the smaller independent banks must send an acknowledgement letter to the home loaners of their original bank stating the home loan change and must receive an acknowledgement from their new loaners, be it a signature, physical or digital. The story. My dad never liked how banks can legally rob people. For people like him who work the daily grind, having to pay the bank what is essentially 2 houses worth in interest payments over 2 or 3 decades is just plain wrong in his eyes. He strives to one day screw a bank over like how they screwed their customers. A contract. Be it sheer dumb luck or is God listened to his prayers and decided to grant him that opportunity, that was what he got. When my dad bought our family's first home, he got a loan from a small bank called DCP Bank. All is well until a few years later in 1997 financial crisis hit. As the small banks were bought out by the larger banks, many home loaners received acknowledgement papers on their new home loan payment plan and policies by their new banks. My dad, for whatever reason, never received this. He only knew that his original bank was bought over the RHP Bank Corporation and that he is now unofficially their customer. My dad was frugal with his money and, God bless him, financially literate. He knew that if he made a full statement against his principal loan, he can avoid paying 30 years worth of interest installments. Sometime in 2007, he went to RHP Bank branch nearby to make a full settlement, and this is how it went down. The employee tells him, "I'm sorry sir, even if you made a full settlement, you would still need to continue making payments for the interest." "What do you mean?" "I have a home loan contract under DCP that states I can make a full settlement without paying for additional interests." "True, but since you've acknowledged and signed under RHP, I have never received the acknowledgement papers. I never signed any papers from your bank, and all I have here is a DCP Bank contract." "Sir, under the One Malaysia Home Loan, you have to send acknowledgement letters about the loan transfer." "Yes, I know. What I want now is for you, RHP Bank, to produce my signature of me acknowledging the new loan policy for RHP. As of now, my paper with DCP is still valid until you produce my signature." Cue 1 hour of the employee and her colleagues scrambling around their files and databases trying to find any acknowledgement from my dad about their loan contract. At this time, the manager of the bank had called my dad into his office to discuss this problem. It basically had gone from civil to a shouting match that can be heard in the neighboring food stalls. My dad couldn't remember most of what was said, but the end of it was what he could still clearly remember, and to his son, it was probably one hell of a conversation ender. The manager tells him, "I'm sorry, Mr. Muhammad, but you still need to make the interest payments, regardless of whether you make a full settlement." "Alright, I understand. I'll just have to take this up to Bank Negara, National Bank of Malaysia. Let them help you find that signature of mine." My dad had the bank manager by the balls now, rather risking a potential $1 million lawsuit and possibly losing his job. He excused himself to make a few phone calls to upper management, which took about half an hour. After said phone calls were done, the manager approached my dad and agreed to the full settlement without the additional interest installment. To add salt to the wound, my dad requested that they have his housing grant ready within a week, to which they delivered. All in all, my dad managed to secure himself a house, the housing grant, and in the process, screwed RHP Bank of what is equal to $60,000 worth of interest payments, which to middle-class Malaysian in 2007 is a retirement fund. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.